All right, let's talk about one of history's most complicated characters, Ivan IV of Russia, who we all know as Ivan the Terrible. So who was this guy really? Was he a bloodthirsty maniac who killed his own son in a fit of rage? Or was he a brilliant nation builder, a true protector of his people? Well, as we're about to find out, the answer is yes.
And right away, you see the problem. On the one hand, you've got the historical record, and it is grim. This is the guy who created Russia's first secret police, who ordered the massacre of an entire city, and yes, who murdered his own son and heir. But then, you look at Russian folklore, and you get this completely different person. A hero, a friend of the little guy, and a righteous enemy of the corrupt nobles. How on earth can these two be the same man?
Well, a big clue is actually hidden in his name. We call him Ivan the Terrible, but that's not quite right. The Russian word is grozny, and grozny doesn't just mean terrible, like evil. It's more like fearsome, awe-inspiring, or formidable. Think of a massive thunderstorm. It's dangerous, sure, but you can't help but be in awe of its power. That's grozny. And that single word kind of opens the door to understanding this guy.
To really get Ivan the man, you have to start with Ivan the boy. Because his reign of terror, it wasn't born in a vacuum. It was forged in a childhood of pure horror, right inside the walls of the Kremlin.
And to get the world that made this boy, you gotta zoom out a bit. Russia at this time was just coming out from under 200 years of Mongol rule, the Golden Horde. Imagine that. For centuries, your people were dominated by a foreign power. It created this deep, desperate need for a single, powerful leader who could finally unite the lands and say, never again. Into that world comes little Ivan, and his childhood is just one trauma after another. His dad dies when he's 3, his mom, who's trying to hold things together, gets poisoned when he's 8. Suddenly he's an orphan at the mercy of the powerful noble families, the boyars. And for the next 8 years, they neglect him, they humiliate him, they'd even barge into his bedroom while he was sleeping. Powerless against these grown men, he took out his rage on the only thing he could, animals. He'd throw them from the Kremlin walls.
Someone who was there at the time wrote this: Ivan was literally surrounded by violence. He learned, very early on, a brutal lesson. Power is everything, and you can trust absolutely no one. You can see how those seeds of paranoia and cruelty were planted deep within him from a very young age.
So now, we're gonna see how that traumatized boy becomes a terrifying king. Because once he got a taste of real power, he was ready to unleash all that pent-up vengeance on Russia.
And he makes his first big move when he's just 16. He crowns himself Tsar of all Russia. Now, Tsar comes from the word Caesar. Think about that. He's not just a prince anymore. He's an emperor. It was a massive statement to the boyars who tormented him. He was basically saying, I'm not one of you, I am above you all.
For a little while, things were actually kind of stable, especially during his marriage to his first wife, Anastasia. He loved her dearly, but when she died suddenly in 1560, it absolutely broke him. He was convinced the boyars had poisoned her, and that was it. That was the trigger. Any restraint he had was just gone. His paranoia and rage became limitless.
And this led to the creation of the Oprichnina. You could think of it as a state within a state. It was a chunk of Russia that Ivan ruled directly, with no one to answer to. And it came with its own private army, a secret police force whose only job was to hunt down and destroy anyone Ivan even suspected of being a traitor. And his agents of terror, the Oprichniki, were the stuff of nightmares. They dressed in all black, rode black horses, and get this emblem. They carried a severed dog's head on their saddle to sniff out traitors and a broom to sweep them away. These were Ivan's personal hounds of hell, and they unleashed a wave of purges and torture that Russia had never seen.
The absolute peak of this unchecked rage came in 1581. During a furious argument, Ivan struck his own adult son and heir with his pointed staff and killed him. In that one single moment, he didn't just kill his child, he doomed his entire dynasty, setting Russia on a path to total chaos after he died.
Okay, but remember what we said at the beginning. That is only one half of the story. So now let's pivot to a completely different Ivan, the Ivan who became a hero. How is that even possible?
Well, you have to remember who writes the history books. Mostly, it was the nobles and the church leaders, the very people who suffered the most under Ivan. But if you look at the stories the common people told each other, a very different picture starts to emerge.
And this folktale is a perfect example. The story goes that Ivan disguised himself and befriended a thief. To test the thief, Ivan says, "Hey, let's go rob the Tsar's treasury." The thief gets outraged, slaps him, and says he would never betray the Tsar. But he says they should go rob the rich, corrupt boyars because they get their money for nothing. Ivan is so impressed that he reveals himself and makes the thief a counselor.
You see what's going on in these stories, right? In the folk tales, Ivan is on the side of the common person. He hates the same people they hate, the greedy, corrupt nobles. For the average peasant, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, even if that friend is the fearsome, all-powerful Tsar.
So it's time to bring these two Ivans together. How do we make sense of the historical monster and the folklore hero, to understand what he really left behind?
It really is like looking at two sides of the same coin. From the historical view, crushing the nobles was a paranoid power grab. But from the folklore view, he was giving corrupt elites what they deserved. The Oprichnina was a brutal secret police, or it was a tool to bring justice to the wicked. His extreme violence was either the act of a madman, or it was the tough medicine Russia needed to be strong.
But here's the bottom line. Ivan's methods were, without a doubt, monstrous. But they worked. By absolutely destroying the power of the old noble families who were always fighting each other, he did what no one before him could. He forged a single, powerful, centralized Russian state.
And that is his real, lasting legacy. He created the blueprint for Russian absolutism, a system of total, top-down power where one person has all the control. He cemented an idea deep in the Russian mindset, that for the nation to be strong and stable, maybe you need a fearsome, even brutal, leader. And that's an idea that would echo through Russian history for centuries.
Which leaves us with a really tough question. The story of Ivan forces us to ask, can a ruler be both a monster and a nation builder at the same time? His legacy is proof that sometimes, disturbingly, one person's reign of terror can become the foundation for another's national pride.